We've done a video going over 10 tips for beginners in Hogwarts Legacy. We've done a video going over 25 tips in general for Hogwarts Legacy. And now we're on to 50 tips for Hogwarts Legacy. These tips are not only for beginners, but also for players that have been playing the game for a while and know what they're doing within the game, but chances are you're going to not know some of these tips, and it's definitely going to save you some time within the game, or actually earn you some XP, or maybe a bit of extra money, and maybe even a bit of more gear. But all of these tips are definitely going to help you in some way. So yeah, in this video we'll be going over 50 tips for Hogwarts Legacy, and let's waste no more time and let's get straight into the video. Tip number 1 is to adjust your camera acceleration to slow down the general rotation of the camera. Tip number 2 is to learn to properly use the map. You're going to be looking at it a lot, so definitely make sure you know how to use all of the features with the map. Tip number 3 is actually one of the features of the map, which is that you can use the left and right button to switch between Hogwarts and the Hogsmeade map, something that you'll probably need to do a lot and not actually realise that you're not selecting the whole map. Tip number 4 is to zoom out to find the level of enemies within a specific region. Tip number 5 is that the enemy difficulty scales with your level. If you are level 40 and an area is level 10 to 30, then the enemy difficulty will be 30 because that's the closest to you. But if you are level 11 in a 20 to 40 level area, the enemy difficulty will be 20 since that is also the closest to you. Adjust your camera sensitivity, which is actually sort of recommended at 1, but it is slightly different obviously, and also adjust your aiming acceleration, which is obviously sort of recommended at 1, but both are very recommended, since it's recommended in general that you do check out your camera settings in general, since they will definitely, or most likely, need to be changed to, fit your needs. Tip number 8 is to change the camera relative targeting. Turn off to look at other enemies without targeting, if that makes sense. Tip number 9 is that you can easily change the difficulty mid-fights if you are finding it too hard. This will improve your damage whilst lowering the enemy's damage. Basically a pretty easy way to get out of a fight if you're finding it too difficult. At any time in the game you can change the difficulty of the game. Tip number 10 is to use Wingardium Leviosa to pick up objects and throw them. Tip number 11 is to use Wingardium Leviosa to throw objects around. Tip number 12 is to use Wingardium Leviosa to throw explosive barrels. Tip number 13 is to use Wingardium Leviosa to pick up enemies. The 13th tip is that you can instantly skip lockpicking with the auto solve mechanic. Make sure you're using that. Tip number 15 is that you can change the story difficulty, which will remove lockpicking completely if you're finding it a bit annoying. Tip number 16 is that you should use the map to find all the Demiggy statues in each area. You'll need this to eventually get the Alaharama spell to skip lockpicks. Tip number 17 is that as soon as you can start finding these statues, do it. You will upgrade your spells and it makes life a lot easier. Tip number 18 is that this will also help you unlock more locations, which will give you a lot more loot. Tip number 19 is that they're mainly placed in the open world rather than Hogwarts, so you don't need to search every room in the castle, just make sure you are keeping an eye out. Tip number 20 is that you can switch to the day and night cycle by using the wait button in the menu. Make sure you're using that if a mission isn't available yet. Tip number 21 is that you can only do this outside of combat, so obviously make sure there are no enemies nearby when you do try to wait some time. Tip number 22 is to use the map to collect all chests within the area. Tip number 23 is to use the map to find various activities around the area. You'll be able to find all sorts of activities just by checking out the map. Tip number 24 is to use white dots on the map to complete the field guide. Tip number 25 is that if you come across a beast, use your bag to capture them. Tip number 26 is that you can use Wingardium Leviosa to levitate beasts before capturing them, which makes them very easier to capture. Tip number 27 is that you can also use Glacio/Arresto Momentum, which is even easier to catch unicorns and thestrals. Tip number 28 is that you could also put it on story difficulty, which removes all the button mashing completely when capturing magical beasts. Tip number 29 is that you can sell all these magical creatures for 120 gold each, and if you do this on story difficulty, it becomes a money making method, which is very easy to use. Tip number 30 is that if you're looking to exploit this method to its full potential, go to the north region around the Jobberknoll Den and capture creatures there. Go back to Hogsmeade to sell your beasts is tip number 31. Tip number 32 is to make sure you are unlocking all of the eye chests that you do come across. Tip number 33 is that there are some eye chests which are bugs, which can actually still award you by opening them again. Tip number 34 is to look out for legendary chests. These will guarantee some legendary gear, so make sure you're opening them when you do find those. Tip number 35 is don't unlock all legendary chests chests early on. Now it is of course good to get a few, but if you open them all early on, you will quickly out-level the gear because the gear is connected to your level when the chests are opened. It's good to get a few and then sell for money and save the rest for later within the game. Tip number 36 is that you can save the game before opening a legendary chest. Open it, and if you don't like it, revert back to the previous save to open it again. Tip number 37 is that if you have a full inventory and open a legendary chest, you will not be rewarded and you can't open them again. This is another bug. Only open legendary chests if you have the space. Tip number 38 is to take any unidentified gear from chests to the room of requirements to actually be able to identify them. Tip number 39 is do this as soon as possible because the level of gear is determined when you open the chest, not when you identify them, so don't try saving them for later. Tip number 40 is to take the time to customize your room of requirements, something definitely worth doing within the game. It's a great feature with great mechanics, so definitely spend some time there. Tip number 41 is that if you do make this mistake, there's a chance that you can go back to a previous autosave, delete items, and then open them again. If not, you will lose out. Tip number 42 is do not ignore the ancient magic hotspots on your map early in the game, because it adds more ancient ability bars. You start with 2 bars, but can end up with 5 bars in total, so definitely make sure that you do not ignore these at all, since you will be able to make great use of them very early on within the game. Tip number 43 is do not ignore the Merlin trials. These are very simple puzzles that will only take seconds to complete, so make sure that you are completing them. Tip number 44 is after completing Merlin trials, immediately check your challenges in the menu and claim the increased storage space, something great that will really help you right at the beginning of the game. You'll find yourself running out of storage all the time, so completing those Merlin trials is crucial in order to unlock that increased storage space, which is also crucial since you'll be finding yourself running out of storage space a lot within the game. Tip number 45 is it's worth completing all for you to get the max inventory space. Like we mentioned with tip number 44, it is worth completing all of these to be able to maximize that inventory space that you can get. Tip number 46 is that you will also need leaves to complete them, so you can buy them in Hogsmeade or craft them in the rooms of requirements. That is up to you. Tip number 47 is that you can also very easily find important locations by flying around and using Revelio to reveal them. This is an easy way to find very good locations within the game that may contain certain items or certain missions. Tip number 48 is before you go to a main mission, make sure that you prepare. These are normally contained within set areas, making it very difficult to go back unless you do actually abandon the mission, so make sure you are ready for it before you go into it. Tip number 49 is to clear your inventory before going into a mission. You'll find loot, and there's nothing worse than finding all the cool stuff but not having enough space to actually take it with you. And the final tip is tip number 50, improve your mode of transport either with a broom or a flying beast, otherwise you'll be spending so much time just going around the map on your feet, which is just going to take ages. And there we go, those are 50 tips for every player really within Hogwarts Legacy. I'm sure there is more than one thing there that will definitely help you either save some time, get a bit of extra XP, or maybe even get a bit of money within Hogwarts Legacy. Those were 50 tips to use within Hogwarts Legacy. So that does just about wrap up things here. Now, I have done a video just like this, but instead I'm going over 10 beginner tips for the game, and if you're interested in watching that, then a link to that video is on the screen now, and you can go ahead and join me over there.